As ever, to the front pages, there's the Sunday Times, their main story. The Chancellor, who's coming on the show later on, says that the public sector is overpaid. That's other cabinet ministers have told the Sunday Times that at a political cabinet meeting earlier in the week, he described public sector workers as overpaid. We'll ask him about that. Sunday Telegraph has gone the BBC pay story, braced for gender pay row. That's going to be a big story next week. The Observer has got the former head of the civil service, Gus O'Donnell, warning Theresa May, the Prime Minister, of chaos over Brexit, partly because of the cabinet rows that I was discussing earlier on. And there's the Mail on Sunday. The French, as ever, piling in. A French plot to wreck Britain by stealing the City of London away, or the financial heart of the City of London away, it says. And they've got a memo inside detailing all of that. Sunday Express on the silent victim of the child snatchers, about an autistic girl who was taken from her family. Much more to talk about, but we're going to start, of course, with the politics, as we always do. Ayesha, you've had a huge number of potential political stories to choose from. You've gone for the Sunday Times there. 3 men with revolvers all pointed at each other.
Absolutely. So this is a very big story by Tim Shipman. It was the Spectator Summer Party on Thursday night, and I'm afraid there was more drama in it than on Love Island. There really was.
Less love, perhaps.
Yes, less
more
love.
And Prosecco.
Yeah, well, actually, it was chilled champagne, and there wasn't that much sun, so everybody knew what they were doing. But it is extraordinary. Interestingly, Tim Shipman is a leading political editor. He wrote a book called All Out War, and it looks like all out war has broken out within the Conservative ranks. It's fair to say that the leadership contest to succeed Theresa May is now on. And every camp is briefing against each other. People are briefing against David Davis. There are smears against Boris Johnson. But I'm afraid the person who is most in the firing line is the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, who I know you've got on your show later on today. And people are leaking against him about the Cabinet. We heard about...
So in specific terms, there were 2 moments in Cabinet, weren't there, last week, where he allegedly said something, went straight to the press.
He basically said 2 things. He said that he thought that public sector pay workers were overpaid, and that for some reason women couldn't drive trains. Now this has come off...
He denies this, I should say.
He does, but I just want to say, look, we've also just had this week a rather unseemly row in the Conservative Party about the use of the N-word, and I'm afraid the Conservative Party are showing themselves to be quite out of touch. Now, his team say, look, none of this is true, all of this has been overhyped. But, you know, Tim Shipman, who is the political editor, has basically... he took to Twitter last night and he said he's getting this verbatim from people. He says, this has been one of the most bizarrely entertaining weeks I have had as a political editor, leaky cabinet, seething rivalry. And I have to say, things are so bad for Theresa May, and I'm sorry to do this, Iain Duncan-Smith, but they are so bad that in the Telegraph there's a story saying that this is reminiscent of Iain Duncan-Smith. That's how bad things are.
I was the Prime Minister at the time, though, so...
But Iain, you did go through a very torrid time when people were sniping against you, and you know what it's like, as it were, to be Theresa May. So what's your advice to her this morning?
Keep going. The honest truth about all this, and this is the point I want to make, and this makes great cover, I know it does, but there's a big divide in the Conservative Party at the moment on another level, and it's between some of them in the Cabinet, it appears, and the rest of the backbenchers, because it's quite interesting that a lot of the new generation and everything else come in are absolutely seethingly furious with what this is representing at the moment, because, you know, their view is they want Theresa to get through the Brexit stuff. She's already said at some point she'll then step down. And their view is none of the above. At some point, maybe somebody else will step through. So
this is a generational question.
I think it may well...
possibly too old to be the next leader.
All I know is that some of the people that I see running around the place, I won't know names, it's reminiscent of the same people running around when I was leader. So all I would say to my colleagues to them is, just for once, shut up, for God's sake, and let everybody else get on with the business of governing. There's not going to be a leadership election. I absolutely promise you lay money on that.
Why not?
Because there is no mood in the Conservative Party in Parliament for a leadership election. They know what the problem is. There's an unusual thing happening at the moment. It's called Brexit. And it has a timetable to it. And you cannot afford that timetable to be broken into by a Conservative leadership election. So we have to get through that first and foremost. So there's a chance here to do their jobs.
As an optimistic and ardent Brexiteer yourself, do you look at this stuff and say this kind of cabinet dispute could actually wreck our chances of a good deal?
Well, it certainly doesn't help matters, but I will say certainly that, you know, the classic summer stuff, want to get through this, get through the conference, get forward. And my general view is that all of this stuff, when it comes about, does nobody any good and everybody a bit of harm. So You know, we have lots of stuff that we might want to talk about with regards to Labour's policies. But in the meantime, we don't get onto that so often.
Just before we do.
I don't think we can just take for granted that there will not be a leadership contest.
Well,
yes,
of course, you'd like to see one.
Absolutely.
We'd all like to see one.
You guys
I just think
I
with
don't
just
think
so much briefing going on, can these men be restrained from their ambition? I don't know.
It's called the backbenchers, and let me tell you now, I categorically tell you right now that there is no support for this to take place. Honestly, I mean, I've been through this, I've seen it before. You know when there's a real groundswell rumbling. There is not
Ian, back
in there.
In the day, people thought you would survive the conference.
No.
Can I just say, in the middle of all of this, I know that political journalists, people that have worked behind the scenes and at the front of politics get very excited about this kind of story, but meanwhile, the British public, who voted for Brexit in numbers unprecedented in British political history, it was the biggest vote ever, are going, why the hell are we not just getting on with it? It's like a group of toddlers. And Gus O'Donnell here in The Observer, he talks about, he was the former Cabinet Secretary, of course, and he's writing about this and the job that his successor, Sir Jeremy Hayward, faces. But the National Audit Office, Amyas Morse, the head of, has waded in to say, this is like the falling apart of a chocolate orange. And it is, isn't it? It's all these pieces, and somebody needs to just come in and go, right, here's the foil, we all need to stick together on this.
I agree with you.
It is ridiculous, and he's saying that David Davis actually would have been better suited coordinating policy from the Cabinet Office rather than actually having a ministerial post on Brexit.
To be fair, he is actually pretty much in the Cabinet Office. That's where his office and everything stands. But I come back to the simple point I make, that as a backbencher, I promise you right now, they want that chocolate orange that you talk about in the foil.
Yeah, but who's going to do it? Because it doesn't look like it's going to be Theresa May.
They're getting some pretty strong messages at the moment, that's all I can tell you.
OK, well, let's move to the other side. There's a photograph there of John Landsman, the founder of Momentum. I was at university with him. I keep warmly and cordially inviting him onto the show, and for some reason he won't come. But there he is. Looking quite tough there. And it's a story. It's a relatively rare interview with John Landsman about Momentum.
Yes. I think it's quite interesting, this story, because underneath some of the other stuff that's going on, there is a real issue here, which is about the way in which, in a sense, some of this politics has shifted. I think the arrival of Momentum, the last election was very much, there was a debate last week about the growing violence. It's not just, a lot of MPs, Conservative MPs, worried about the nature and the way that this campaigning starts, but it's also Labour MPs. I mean, I know a lot of Labour MPs who feel deeply threatened by him to get them out and to do nothing else but to target people who they don't think are Corbyn supporters. And I think this is it'll grow, this story, because it's a party that at some stage has got to confront the idea of a party within a party.
Yeah. I wish he was here on the sofa to defend himself, but it should also be said, however, that Momentum are the people who helped mobilise 500,000 young voters. They helped Jeremy Corbyn come. It is an extraordinary political phenomenon.
Well,
it's not just about abuse.
My personal view is it's the growth of a party within a party. And now, in this article, what's interesting, he is now talking about taking control of leadership elections, nominations, who should become MPs. All of this is a real push for power, which is quite interesting,
not
really.
Surprising in a sense.
Well, not necessarily, but I simply say, where is the Labour Party in this? Is it Momentum or is it different?
Anybody in politics, anyone, particularly women, particularly somebody from a BAME background, there is a lot of abuse being thrown around. I get as much abuse from the right, from Conservatives, as I do from people on the left. And I think it's incumbent on all political leaders to make a stand on this and just say abuse against anybody is not acceptable. I think there are actually guidelines going to the Labour NEC to look at this. But it is easy to demonise Momentum.
Not demonising, I'm simply saying they're a party within a party.
Jeremy Corbyn did create an incredible amount of enthusiasm at this general election. He led with ideas. He did mobilise young people who don't normally come out to vote. So it's not all malign. Some of it is very positive, and some of it is about people being energised in politics. And even your seat, which was once a Tory stronghold, is now a marginal.
Within a party?
I think this is
I think there's a party within every party. You could argue that in the Conservatives, there are hardline Eurosceptic backbenchers that have been a party within a party for decades.
The organisation is nothing like this at all. This is an organised movement.
Enough of
that has inhabited the Labour Party. You know that, and I know that.
Let's move on to a more traditional party within a party, En Marche, or an untraditional party, and the French. It's a very, very interesting story in the Mail on Sunday, and this is about France trying to nick the financial heart of the City of London and plonk it in Paris.
Yeah, this is a leaked memo from Jeremy Brown, who is a former Lib Dem MP who's envoy now for the city. And he says that actually the French are going to play pretty hardball on Brexit. They do not want a soft Brexit. They see the opportunity. London at the moment is the top city in Europe for financial services. They think Paris could steal that away, and they feel quite, you know, quite motivated to do this. Yeah. So I think
and
when
they want the maximum amount of chaos.
That's my only surprise is that anyone thinks this is a story. We knew this 6 months ago.
But it does show you. But it does show you that when we are told that Brexit's going to be really simple and straightforward, it's not. It follows on from Jane's story actually about what Gus O'Donnell was saying. And the problem that we have to, or what we have to realise is, we don't have all the power in these negotiations. The EU will have to make a decision about, yes, our trade is very valuable to them, but they also will want to make a bit of an example of us to show to other countries.
We certainly don't have the power also when we go forward with a warring cabinet. Yeah. You know, our cabinet is looking so weak, our government is looking so weak.
Can I just come back to this story? I mean, in fact, you could have written this story 2 years ago. Because what's been going on is France has been endlessly trying to attack the City of London and take the business away. So this is not new. And by the way, the one single reason
we're running out of time, so let's move on to a couple more stories.
Is how much you have to earn to make $1 million. Well, 6 million you have to earn.
I think people are concerned about
big story in London at the moment, of course, is the acid attack.
Yeah, which I have a horrible feeling is going to get more widespread. But Amber Rudd has written a piece here in, I think it's the Sunday Times, basically saying that the Crown Prosecution Service, CPS, is going to review their guidance so that acid and other corrosive substances can be classed as dangerous weapons. Actually, my only surprise is that they're not already, to be honest. And, of course, it's another thing for the police to deal with everything else that they've got going on, because these kids are, I think, because they think, stop and search now, I can't have a knife, they're now sort of using sports drinks bottles
and filling them with corrosive
and this
acid.
Is now their weapon of choice, so it's horrendous.
They're attacking kind of Deliveroo motorbike drivers to steal the bikes to then carry out more attacks. Speaking of bad stuff happening, nowhere on the planet is worse at the moment than Mosul. Now liberated, but just dust and horror, really.
Yes, I mean, it's the worst thing, as an ex-soldier I can tell you, the worst thing you ever do is have to fight in a city, in a built-up environment, because the devastation, the violence, and then the anger grows because, you know, people on one side lose colleagues and then they start to lose track of what's actually human rights issues. And you're seeing it now breaking out as they've finally taken Mosul. You can see almost the reaction from many of those who've occupied it is little or no sense that people they capture now should be dealt with in any kind of humane way. I don't say that this is going on with any tacit approval, but it's almost in a sense to be expected. I mean, the devastation is astonishing. And what it does say, and there's an interesting story about this in other papers, is that the whole idea of ISIL doesn't exist because they had a mass army ready to go. They only moved into Iraq because the Sunni Muslims decided they'd been so oppressed now by the existing government that they all turned to ISIL. Now, this is the question that we beg afterwards. How does Iraq govern itself after this, if all we see now is factionalised anger on the back of
Very
Mosul?
good question. Moving again to a domestic story, Ayesha. Everybody on the edges of their seat wondering who is going to be the next Doctor Who.
Well, it's so exciting, and they're going to announce it just after the Wimbledon final today, so which makes me think maybe it's Roger Federer, maybe he's going to be the new Doctor Who. There's lots of speculation that maybe it might be a woman, and I would love to see that, because I think women can drive cars, they can drive trains, they can definitely be Doctor Who as well.
But isn't Doctor Who traditionally a man? I don't really understand why it has to be a woman.
I think everything's changing. I think, you know, Doctor Who's a bit of a shapeshifter. I think, you know, he could become a woman.
OK, well, listen, we've run out of time. There's so much else we could have talked about. Yes, well, you all talked too much, you see, so we ran out of time. Not my fault. Well, yes, I have to confess, got up this morning in the dark, put on the wrong pair of trousers. We'll have to cope. I should also say we're all going on holiday, except for Ayesha. You're off to the Edinburgh Festival to do your gig there, so have a great time there. Thanks very much indeed for that for now. And so